Hi, I'm Dan at vintagevelo.org, and today we are going to be taking a look at the prevalence of crashes in the pro peloton and the results of those crashes in the pro peloton. Now, statistics definitely show that in the last 10 years or so, crashes have increased quite dramatically within the pro peloton. Now, pro riders, they've been falling off bikes and crashing since the very first road race. So crashing is nothing new, but there's certainly a lot more of them now, and the results on the riders is definitely more dramatic. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this in media recently, and I thought, well, I got a few ideas and thoughts about this myself, and most of which have definitely been covered, so I'm kind of rehashing some stuff here, but also there's a couple of points that people don't want to talk about that I'm going to come on to towards the end of this video. So if you want to skip to the more controversial parts, I'll flag the time up below me so you can just jump forward to then. If you're okay listening to me babbling on for a bit, then hey, hang on in there for the duration. Kudos to you. Now I'm out today on this old school ex-Gatorade Bianchi. We've seen this one before. It's a lovely bike to ride. I really enjoy it. And the geometry and frame setup of this bike is just a lovely thing to ride. It descends beautifully, climbs pretty well, goes on the flat lovely, does everything that you want. But let's not forget, this is a totally hand-built, custom-made ex-pro team bike from back in what we can kind of call the golden age, early 90s, late 80s. Things are definitely different now. So let's get on to the first couple of points. Also, of course, we can't overlook the obvious fact that road infrastructure now is much more complicated than it was back in the glory days of the 70s, 80s and 90s. We've obviously got speed bumps, loads more roundabouts, pinch points, loads of horrible things. A peloton riding along 8 abreast, suddenly pinch point down to 5 abreast, inevitable consequences. Now, I think maybe DS's, Directors Sportives, have got to take an element of responsibility here. They all know where these pinch points are coming up, or where the traffic furniture is. They could just say to their guys, back off a bit, get around that roundabout carefully, then back on it, but they'll never do that. They want to win, they want to ride as hard as possible for the entire duration of the race now, as opposed to before where it was, it was a 5-hour race, you might do 3 hours easy and 2 hard. Now if it's a 5-hour race, it's 5 hours flat out from start to finish, and I think that also leads to a lot more rider fatigue. But yeah, roads now have a lot to answer for the extreme pressure on the peloton. Also, I do note, whenever you look at old school racing photographs, period, Tour de France footage, the gaps between riders are much bigger. I don't think the perfect understanding of how much extra drag you can get rid of when you're riding like 4 or 5 centimeters behind someone, as opposed to maybe 12-30 centimeters behind, was quite fully appreciated. So those gaps are now minuscule, and of course that means there's no chance, or very little chance, for quick reaction unless you spot it long before it actually happens. And coupled with that, it's quite obvious, because of modern technology on race bikes, they're definitely going quicker and stopping. You come off your bike and you hit that blacktop at speed, or even at low speed, it's going to hurt, it's going to do damage no matter what. But one thing I have noticed is the prevalence of broken bones and major damage to pro riders now in comparison with, let's say, the tougher guys from the 70s and 80s. And now by that, I mean, if you look back, Paris-Roubaix last weekend, we always expect people to come off injuries, broken bones. 1981 Paris-Roubaix, ridden and won by the legendary super tough guy Bernard Hinault. Now, he fell off 7 times in that race, including once when a dog ran out in front of him and took his wheel out. Grumont, I believe, was the name of the dog. And, you know, you come off at Paris-Roubaix 7 times. Sure, bruised and battered, but no real broken bones or anything like that. Remounts and ends up winning the race. Now, I think nowadays, because of the extreme dieting that goes on in the pro peloton to make riders, I mean, Hinault back then was probably weighing about 74 kilo, and he was a renowned climber. Now he would be expected to be 60 kilo all year round, and that kind of dieting comes at a cost, and the cost is potential for brittle bones. And I'm pretty certain one of the reasons why these crashes seem so much more devastating now is because the riders themselves are not, their bone structures are not as physically strong as they used to be, and I think that's a direct result of long-term super dieting. But I'm sure someone out there can prove me wrong on that. Just my opinion. Now, of course, any good bike should be able to descend perfectly. And if yours doesn't, you've got to ask yourself a serious question why. This Bianchi is a total joy to descend flat out. Okay, time for the controversial part. This might come as a shock to some of you, but not all pro bikes in the peloton are particularly good. A lot of them are superb, but some of them, unless you're Chris Froome, you're never allowed to say whether it's a good or bad bike. And some of those bikes, you know, any carbon fibre lightweight bike's going to go up a hill well if you push down hard enough on the pedals, but coming back down again on a technical descent, now that requires 2 things: a really good able professional cyclist who can descend, and a really good able pro bike that can reward the descending. Now, not every pro is a brilliant descender. We've seen plenty of examples of pretty poor descending, but when it comes to the bikes, they're not allowed to tell you. I mean, basically they're riding whoever's giving them the paycheck, whoever's sponsoring the teams, giving the bikes, and then ultimately, you know, some of that money is coming through to their paycheck, so they're getting paid to ride those bikes. They're never going to say anything bad about them. It's just bad for their future contract negotiations. But I can tell you from straightforward, honest history, I once had a Canyon Ultimate in a fairly large size, might have had a bearing on it, I don't know, went up a hill brilliantly, awful descender, very sketchy, always had to concentrate on the descent, none of that smooth, supple, flowing lines that we all graciously talk about when it comes to a good descent. No, nothing like that. And I bumped into another chap in a race bike shop who was having his wheels balanced, because on his Ultimate he was having exactly the same issues, and he was uncertain whether he wanted to descend at any speed above 50 kilometers an hour, and that just kind of shows you the extent of the problem there. Also, you know, I was reading only in this month's Cyclist magazine a review on the Orbea Orca, and in that the reviewer states quite clearly that to get the best out of the bike on a descent, you need to be a very able descender, because it's quite jittery. And, you know, reading between the lines, if a journalist in media, print media, is actually writing that, you know, it's jittery, you know it is really jittery. So you've got to be careful there. Also, I read another review. It's a triple bike challenge, 150 kilometers route around some mountains. One of the bikes was a specialized Atheos. Now, admittedly, Atheos not aimed at the pro peloton because it's too light, but the reviewer found that a seriously sketchy descender because of its lightweight. And again, these are just things that I'm finding in the print media. What the pros are finding, you're never gonna know. But for sure, you know, as I said before, if in doubt, grab a Dogma. That's what I did, and boy, the geometry and descending on those is just a total joy. But it's not the same on all the other bikes, and neither are all of the other pros riding them. So what that does mean is when they're tight and packed on a fast descent, things can go wrong very quickly. Anyway, not far now from a cafe stop, so I'll stop babbling on now and we'll catch up in a moment. Well, there you go. That's my take on why there are more crashes with worse outcomes in the pro peloton these days. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. Riders are not going to put weight on to increase the bone density. Director sportives are not going to back off the pressure for their guys to be up front all the time. And positions and bikes are going to continue to almost morph more into aero time trial bikes, which are great for time trials, no good for bunch races. And of course, you know, riders who are perhaps not the most gifted descenders are still going to be encouraged by the DS to get out there and stick with everyone. And of course, that peloton packed in super tight on roads that have definitely changed. You know, it's just not what it was. But hey, there we go. I guess we just have to accept that. I can't see anything really changing anytime soon. If you have an opinion on this or on any other reason why their crashes are happening, do pop it in the comments down below. And if you have any thoughts on how it could be changed, also pop it in the comments below. You never know who's listening. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. Do like and subscribe for anything else that's cool to do with vintage bikes. Thanks a lot.